everybody. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on Down to Earth with Carrie. As you can see, it is quite the morning around here. We're kind of caught up with stuff going on. It's just amazing to me, the kind of stuff you come across as soon as you're about to go on air and to talk about the issues that matter. And one of the issues that matter, we're in the midst of some sort of virus, and I am totally amazed at the fact that while we're in the midst of this virus, all of a sudden you find Facebook groups that are telling people that they should not vaccinate. I don't understand where that comes from, so we're going to go into to talk about that, because that is quite the thing, right? And it's disturbing to all of us, because we saw how the measles virus took place last year. Remember that? How it just sort of rampantly ran through neighborhoods and rampantly ran through spaces where we were kind of looking for in communities, especially in communities that are challenging, right? And so we wanted to be able to talk about that, because, and I need your feedback if you don't mind. I want to find out how can we perhaps join that group, and how can we recognize that? It's just the strangest thing to me, because I am trying to figure out, how did we get here? How did we get to the stage where I know there are conspiracy theories all over the place. I get that, sincerely, I do, right? And I just want to know, how did we get to the stage where we think that we should not vaccinate young children, especially with the advent of modern medicine? We live in modern times, and we have seen how modern medicine has prevented what diseases that took out a generation ago. And we can't seem to understand, why is it now that it continues to happen, right? And so I wanted to talk about that this morning, because when I heard this story, I was taken aback, and I wanted to know why this is happening, just like everybody else. I mean, why is this going on, and why is it happening right now? And it's just a thing to me, right? It's just like, why are we here? Why are we here right now, and why is this happening? So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because I feel as if there are so many variables to this conversation. And it's mind-blowing to me, just like it is to you. I mean, just look around us. We're in the midst of a virus that seems to have taken over the world. We really don't know the extent of this. We're still living in it. And you know what's the scariest thing? The scariest thing is that we don't have an antidote for it. The CDC says that there won't be a vaccine available for the coronavirus until November. That means they're taking people, they have to study it, determine what it is, and then develop a vaccine that can take it. In the meantime, people are getting wildly infected. And if it is not wildly contained, then we have a problem. Just like in some parts of our country, there are still pockets of people who still eat some of the foods that we see people are eating in China and in some parts of Indonesia. There are still people who eat like that. That's part of their culture. They still copy that. Just recently, I saw something floating on my Instagram page where somebody was importing wild birds into the country in a bag coming from one of those flights, one of those countries. And you're like, seriously? Because it might be strange to our culture, but it is normal to these folks, right? And so they are eating what they're accustomed to eating. Even when they emigrate and they migrate to another country, that doesn't mean they have adopted all the attitudes of the new country. they still hold on to their traditions. And right now, that's what we're seeing. So in the midst of this, you have a whole other group of people who have lived here for centuries, a whole other group of people who have lived here for a while, who are refusing to get vaccinated. You got to understand that when the polio virus was running rampant in the 1940s and 50s, they developed a vaccine for that. It's tamped out that virus, right? And now you're looking at malaria and common things that used to kill out whole populations and eradicate whole groups of peoples. We've successfully controlled it by vaccination. And yet you still have educated people today who are aware, who know how to join a social media group, but who refuse to get vaccinated. And they're on the rise. Check this out. This is the story that I want to tell you about. A Facebook group dedicated to health misinformation are being used to share potentially dangerous advice. The mother of a 4-year-old Colorado boy, you heard about this story, right? The mother of a 4-year-old Colorado boy consulted a Facebook group called Stop Mandatory Vaccination. So I want to pose that question to you, right? And it is one of the largest known health misinformation groups with more than 178,000 members after the boy was diagnosed with the flu. According to the mother's post, the boy was prescribed Tamiflu by a doctor. So she sought medical opinion. She went and sought medical opinion. The doctor prescribed Tamiflu to have the prescription filled. The boy was running a fever. The mother refused to give him the medication. So guess what? She got locked up. Are you listening to me? The kid died. He was 4 years old because the anti-vaxxer groups told her, do not subject to mandatory vaccination. The end result is that little boy, he died. Facebook anti-vaxxer groups are on the rise. This one has 178,000, my mistake, members, right? And they've taken over. And their goal is to spread health misinformation. Now, we're in the midst of a coronavirus, right? We don't have a clue. Yesterday, I went to the doctor. I kid you not. Yesterday, I went to the doctor, right? And it was just a regular checkup. I took my youngest child to the doctor. It was just a regular okie dokie checkup, right? And I kid you not, y'all. Do you know when you go to the doctor now, they're actually screening you? They ask you questions. Have you been to China lately? Have you been in contact with anyone who has been in China? I was like, are you kidding me? It's now one of the questionnaires first and foremost. Are you running a fever? Are you running a temperature? If you have been in contact with anyone who has been to China, you need to report this immediately. I kid you not. We've got to understand that health workers are on the what? They're on the forefront. They're the ones who are on the front line of dealing with viruses. We've got to be a little bit more respectful, and we've got to be nicer. When we go into public health facilities, when we go to the doctor, when we go to the health clinics, when we go to urgent cares and to hospital emergency rooms, for the love of God, please be kind to healthcare workers. They are on the front line of fighting diseases. They're the ones who are taking your shot, they're taking your temperature, they're touching your body without a glove so you don't get offended, right? And yet here we are telling people that we should not be with them. What the heck? Do you see what I'm saying? This is the craziest thing. We're telling people we're not paying attention. And this is exactly why most of us end up just like it's just totally crazy, because it's the craziest thing ever. How does this happen? What are we doing about this? And when I read these stories, I'm like, seriously? Like, you still find that people today do not want to get a vaccination with the proof and the evidence the evidence we have is that vaccinations work, and you still have conspiracy theorists telling you foolishness that it's don't subject to mandatory vaccination. That is the craziest thing I have ever heard, right? And now what is going on is that the story seems to surround the fact that these Facebook anti-vaxxer groups, right? They're just crazy, and they're militant, right? They're very militant, right? So these anti-vaxxer groups with this 4-year-old boy, they literally forced the mother to not subject to vaccination. And I think it's time that the government starts paying attention to this. I think it's time that we, as the citizens, start rising up. Now, I don't know about you, but my children, for me, from what I have seen, I made sure from my children were born that they were given vaccinations, because I recognize that we live in a world where stuff happens. And I recognize that because we live in a world where stuff happens, we don't always have control over the people you come in contact with. And everyone does not wash their hands. Everybody does not sneeze into something and dispose of it. Everybody doesn't use hand sanitizer. People routinely come out of bathrooms and not wash their hands. So when my children were born, I did not want my children to be subjected to diseases that were preventable. It wasn't mandatory, it was required. I could have opted out for religious reasons or whatever, but I didn't think that was the wisest course of action for young children. My oldest child is about to go to college. My youngest child is about to go to college, and she still has one more shot to get, right? And I told her yesterday, I said, you are going to get this shot. You are going to get this, because when you go out to college, you're going to come in contact with an even wider group of people, some of whom were raised as anti-vaxxers. I don't want anything to happen to my child. So I'm going to make sure she gets the vaccination, the last one that she's required to get just about at 17. So I could never be an anti-vaxxer, because the evidence, and I think these people traffic in this kind of information because it suits their purpose. Have you ever heard about people who just like to call wolf? They just like to cry wolf. They're just wolf, wolf, help, help, watch me, attention, attention. They just want to get attention, because how in God's name, how on the face of the God's green earth, you're going to tell me that vaccinations don't work when we no longer, as an advanced society, we live in America, you live in Britain, some of you live in the UK, some of you live in France. We live in advanced societies where we no longer have to contend with diseases that a generation ago or 100 years ago tore people, killed people, and eradicated whole groups of people. How could you see this and not respond to it, right? Do you see what I'm saying? And you and I now have to deal with people who don't believe in vaccination and won't vaccinate their kids. So my kid and your kid has to go to school with people who were not vaccinated so that they can get a disease. It's not fair, right? So this Facebook group, this woman, she has her 4-year-old son. She took her son to the doctor for the flu. The doctor prescribed a certain course of action, and she decided to obviate the doctor's prescribed care. She consulted anti-vaxxer groups who forced her to not participate in the doctor's prescription. The end result is that her son died. So now the police are holding her responsible for her son's death, and are holding her responsible for child abuse, child neglect, and possibly manslaughter. Because maybe it's even premeditated, because they don't know. Did you want to kill your child if you see the child sick and you took the child to the doctor, but you won't give him the medication? Wow. Right? And these people they give out false health information. Let me just tell you, they say preventable diseases are hoaxes. Lord have mercy. We're living in the age of coronavirus, and they're telling people that preventable diseases are hoaxes. They also say that they mass contact parents whose children have died and suggest that vaccines are to blame. Imagine you're hurting. Your child has died from a disease, and you are already hurting. Your grief is now compounded. by someone who is saying, did your child get vaccinated? Maybe the vaccine is to blame, right? Because the child had been running a fever. The woman said the doctor prescribed Tamiflu. She didn't pick it up. Tamiflu, everybody who has ever had a flu, that's what they give young, is one of the most prescribed medications to treat the flu, right? It shortens the length of the illness, right? Of course it has side effects. I take a vitamin that has side effects. Every time I take a pill, I could be popping NDMA into my system. Hello, somebody, right? The flu is a much higher risk, but instead these people are, did you know that 10,000 people in the US die each year from the flu? No, I don't take the flu vaccine, and I'm just going to be upfront about it, because the last time I took it, it made me violently sick. But the flu comes around once a year. So you can develop an immunity to it if you follow a prescribed course of action, right? I make sure I wash my hands, right? I make sure that I take my vitamins, I eat right. If I feel like I'm getting the flu, it's just viral. You can't do anything about it. They won't even give you antibiotics for it because it's a virus, right? But if you're running a temperature, though, that's a different thing. They'll treat you for it, but whatever, right? But you're talking about diseases like malaria, typhoid, measles, mumps, rubella, diseases that we had stamped out because of modern medicine. Those meningitis, those are diseases that are preventable with vaccination. And these people are spreading misinformation. You remember when they said that autism is caused by a vaccine? I think we need to go back and look at the evidence. Because some of these folks, when they were pregnant, they were taking all kinds of drugs. They were taking antidepressants, because remember now, as a woman, for the first 6 weeks, you don't even realize you're pregnant. It's 2 weeks after you miss a period, you become aware that, wait a minute, I missed a period. So the first 6 weeks of conception, you don't even know. So most people carry on living their normal lives. If they drink, they drink. If they smoke, they smoke. Some people smoke right through their pregnancy. Some people drink right through their pregnancy. Who knows what these children are subject? Some people continue to take opioids right through their pregnancy. Some of these folks some of these folks who are anti-vaxxers, I want to know what their regular health routine is, because none of them seem to profess a health routine that involves just I eat right, I exercise, and so on. They're just telling you don't take a vaccination because the government is vaccinating people, but there is no evidence to point that out. In fact, some of these diseases, we really need to stop them. I kid you not. They haven't developed, I feel like by the time they develop a vaccination for the coronavirus, we'll have another one. Because some of these viruses are spread from humans from animals to humans really quickly. And if you don't have any immunity against it, it's like whatever. I don't know. I am just saying that these anti-vaxxer groups, they need to get a grip. They need to get a grip on reality, that the things that they are professing at people are not true. Telling people it's mass misinformation. I think it's going to get to the stage where you can do that if you homeschool your child, but if your child is going to come to public school, I think that's how it is now. They are required to have a series of shots. That's why they maintain certain groups that they're a part of, because the laws are more ambivalent, right? So you are part of this group, you can claim this exemption kind of thing. But is it fair to the general population? No, it's not. Is it fair to you and I? No, because when we go out in public, I don't know who I'm coming in contact with. Last year, when the measles virus broke out and started in Metro Detroit, the place where the person touched was somewhere that I shop at. It was a grocery store that I shop at. Luckily for me, myself and my children are vaccinated, but when they put it out on the news, when they broadcasted it, they made sure they told people so the public could be aware. Right now, A woman in St. Clair Shores, Michigan, a healthcare worker, was diagnosed with tuberculosis. And guess what? She came in contact. She passed it on to a child who came into the facility. She said she did not know she got it. They're investigating how she got it. So now everybody who came in contact with that healthcare worker at that facility is now being being quarantined, right? They're now being treated for tuberculosis. You would be surprised how many people have not been vaccinated against some of these common diseases. We got to understand that the world has changed. People travel more than they used to. Maybe 50 years ago, people didn't go to Thailand and Bangladesh and Bangkok and, other Cambodia and so on as frequently as they do now. People travel more now. So people are always coming and going, right? You get on, and once upon a time, when you got on a plane, remember before the plane landed at its next destination, they used to spray it. You remember? They used to spray it because that destination required that whatever the people have on board, it doesn't get transmitted. Well, environmentalist group says, I don't know what they're spraying, so don't spray the plane while I'm on it. I know we're all getting diseases. Sometimes they take things a little too far, right? It gets overboard. I know that's how you feel about it. You'll probably, because you're on social media, you don't want everybody to see it, but I know you're nodding your head silently behind your screens. Lucky for you, you can hide behind a screen. But, you're like, huh? Yeah. So we're constantly coming in contact with people who perhaps have not been vaccinated against the diseases that we think used to be common, but are now rearing their ugly heads. Some of these diseases never really went away. It's just that the World Health Organization and the United Nations, UNESCO, right, and other organizations made sure that everybody was exposed to vaccinations as much as possible. So we developed an immunity to it. That means if it's in you already, it's not going to affect you. The antibodies are already in you. I'm beginning to think maybe they need to develop a vaccine for AIDS so that the antibodies already in you, you won't get. I kid you not, but AIDS is sexually transmitted. So because AIDS is transmitted by touch, you have to be engaged with someone intimately. That's a different criteria as opposed to airborne viruses and viruses that are common because you touch or you breathe the air that the person has come in contact with, right? The flu can wipe out 100 million if you think about it. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Think about it. And just look at the coronavirus. The coronavirus by itself has the potential to be dangerous, to be extremely dangerous to most of us. Don't you think? And yet here we are with people who are saying, I'm not going to do that. That's an option. It's not an option for me. Don't come in contact with me then. Don't mix with the public. Why don't you stay in your own little group and in your own little commune? Don't go to the grocery store. Don't go to the mall. Don't take your kid out for pizza or for ice cream since you don't want to be vaccinated. I think the rest of us need to start holding these groups accountable. I think eventually the authorities will, because they're spreading misinformation that is harmful to public safety. They're telling people, and they prey on people's grief. Somebody needs to bring a class action suit against them. Because imagine you've lost a child. You have to deal with the guilt and the pain of losing a child, burying a child, watching a child laid out, right? And you have to deal with that. And now, compounded by that, you also have to deal with the fact that they're going to tell you that maybe it's a vaccination without any proof. Show me the darned evidence. Then I'm going to believe it. Because in my experience, what I have seen is that polio, mumps, measles, malaria, yellow fever, and common diseases were wiped out. Eventually, the government might get to the stage where they say everybody needs to take the flu virus so that you don't take a flu shot so you don't get flus. Now it's under an advisory so that seniors and young children are protected more than the rest of us because we can fight it. I ran into someone yesterday and I had to really look at them because he said he had an upper respiratory infection. And he said he just couldn't fight it, just couldn't fight it, had to go to the doctor. They put him on 30 days of rest to not to deal with the public, because in his field, he engages with the public. Sometimes you don't even know people who are on the front line. Have you ever thought about them? Right? The people who are the EMTs, the people who drive the ambulance, the people in the ER, they're on the front line. You know who else is on the front line? Teachers. They come in contact with kids who are not vaccinated. Hey, how you doing? Right? Think about that. People on the front line, right? The people at the pharmacy, right? Think about that. The police officer. You ever thought about it? The police officer is chasing somebody who has already done something wrong, and yet he doesn't know who he's touching. They have all kinds of stuff going on in them. Think about that, folks. Think about it. It's unbelievable. You go to the urgent care. I hate seeing that. You go to the emergency room. Be nice to the people who are on the front line. Be nice to them. Treat them with kindness. They're human too. They're touching you. Be nice to them. They're on the front line. They're getting it. They develop immunity to these diseases. Right? Be nice to people. It's just crazy, right? An anti-vaxxer group, anti-vaccination. So they don't believe in being vaccinated at all. In today's world, in light of the coronavirus, can you believe it? Just think about that, y'all. There is a virus that is worldwide, and there are actually a group of people who believe that vaccination won't work. And the rest of us are like chomping at the bit saying, do they have a vaccination for the coronavirus yet? Can we all just line up and get it? Because we don't know who is who. Right now, there is a backlash against Asians because everybody's like, if you're Asian, you probably have it. I don't want to get it. That's not fair. It's nice to be that. It's not fair. It's not fair. But think about it. And yet you have groups. This is what I say. This is the privilege we enjoy from living in first world countries with access to better healthcare. Yeah? That's what it comes down to. So because you have that privilege, yeah? And you can go to a healthcare professional 24 hours a day and be diagnosed and expect to be reasonably treated for whatever it is that you have. So you are going to abuse the system by not ramping up the vaccination protection first. Unbelievable. Let me read what folks are saying. But the people pushing the vaccinations are also pushing vice. How can people know who to trust? That's true. You don't know. That's true. That is a reasonable comment and a reasonable, comment to make. I agree with you because you don't know. But largely, you're going to want to trust the authority that the government has mandated to do it. Because you look at the evidence and you say, well, how many people are being affected by being vaccinated? This much. Well, how many people are affected by not being vaccinated? This much. So then you look at it and you balance it out and say, I think I'm going to go with the people who are being vaccinated. You see, that's how I looked at it, right? I looked at what are the numbers telling me from vaccinations against malaria, measles, and so on. And when I saw where those numbers were prevented, that most of us did not get malaria, mumps, tuberculosis, and so on. Well, when I saw that, I said, okay, so that the numbers match out. And so I said, okay. So these folks over here, though, their kids are getting, like last year we saw where the measles virus ran rampant in communities that were what? Anti-vaxxers. That's where it ran rampant in. What did that tell you? Icky situation, isn't it? It told you quite clearly that they need to go get vaccinated because the virus was rampant in their community. It started there. How it started when they traced it is one guy came from Israel who had not been vaccinated. That one guy. He came to Metro Detroit and he dropped it everywhere. Then he went to New York State, and it just took off like it had legs and just ran rampant. One guy, right? The government system media was set up by the usurious class for profit. Well, you're propagating your own ideas. Usury is an old-fashioned term for money lending. We're not talking about banking now, right? We want to keep on message, right? We want to stay on message and talk about these anti-vaxxer groups that are actually ruining and hurting people. The thing that gets to me is that after someone's child has died, these groups are telling these folks and telling vulnerable people who are already vulnerable to grief, who are grieving, that the reason their child died was because they were exposed to a vaccine. Just like they told this woman whose son had flu, they told her not to give her son, not to do what the doctor said, and then the son died, right? Well, I agree that to some extent they're pushing vaccines for profit. I don't know. Maybe they are. But I do know that the evidence is that when you take the shot against mumps, rubella, measles, my children never got it. I'm going to use my children. They never got those diseases. They never got them all through high school, through, childhood, when, kids are prone to stuff. They never got it. I myself got those shots, right? So I look at the evidence and I'm like, the evidence is balancing it out, right? So this woman was saying, listen to this. This woman said she was treating her child, the woman in Colorado, she was treating her child with natural cures, peppermint oil, vitamin C, and lavender. That's what she was treating. The advice also said that breast milk, thyme, and elderberry are recommended treatments for the flu. Yeah, and people did that 100 years ago. Hey, people did that 100 years ago and died, right? But the flu is circulating. And even if you don't get the flu shot, if you go to the doctor, you should follow what the doctor says, right? I went to the doctor yesterday and I trust her. Find a healthcare professional whom you trust, right? I went to the doctor yesterday and I trust her. She actually thanked me for placing my family's health in her trust. I trust her, right? She told my daughter, said, well, I'm feeling some stuff here and so on. And she asked certain questions and she said, well, we're not going to give you an antibiotic. Let it run its course. Let it come out. Do the things that you do. And she prescribed a series of things to do. And we were just like, yeah, reasonable. Yeah, we trust her. Find a healthcare professional whose advice you trust. Somebody I know went to the doctor recently. He took the flu shot in November. And after taking the flu shot, he got sick, just stayed sick right through December. He took it in November, got sick through the end of November, December, and January. I said, wait a minute, something is wrong, right? Developed an upper respiratory infection that wouldn't go away, that he ended up being, they told him he had some immunity. His body's immune system had been compromised, right? And in listening to what he was saying, I said, well, you're a senior, so it is what it is. What are your habits, your eating habits, and so on and so forth. And in listening to what he was describing, I said, but he changed doctors because he felt like one set of doctors did not recommend that he go see an allergist. So I said, get a second opinion. If what they're doing is not working, go get a second opinion. So he went and got a second opinion. And the second opinion says you have an allergy problem. That's what's causing the thing up in your head. So what I'm saying is, if you go to the doctor and you don't trust that opinion, go get a second opinion. We all do, right? Get a second opinion. Get someone else, sometimes a different perspective, right? Looks at it from a different way. You will know because it will resonate with you. And you will know that this is what I should follow. This woman decided to follow the advice of the anti-vaxxer group when her son was deeply ill. So it wasn't like at the onset of the virus. This is when it is advanced. And he was having seizures. Seriously? She followed the advice, right? So these people, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how people listen and take the advice of these folks. People are vulnerable for information. And in today's world, because of how much information is out there, everybody has a Facebook group. And they go and join these groups and spread misinformation. And you have to ask yourself, in light of the evidence, where is the evidence that points to the fact that these are wrong? There is no evidence. There is no evidence that points to that. No, there is no evidence. I am saying that I am not an advocate for vaccination, but I am saying, in light of the evidence that 100 years ago people were dying from common diseases and that we are not dying today, take the vaccination. As a matter of fact, if I have to leave here now, leave the States now to go to Africa, I am required to take certain kinds of vaccinations before I go, right? Because when you go into certain environments, you are exposed to certain viruses that are not common to your environment. So here in the western part of the world, there are certain viruses that are not prevalent here. It could be because we have a different climate system. I think cancer is more prevalent. Cancer is like literally the air we breathe here, right? Because we have more toxins in our environment. Maybe that's why some of these other diseases don't survive. But in certain other parts of the world, you are required to take some vaccination. You should. It's required action. If you want to live and you want to live healthily, I would suggest that you do. Right? I'm just saying. And if you have a child and you have young children, for the love of God, please go to a healthcare professional and listen to what they have to say. Your children go to preschool. If you have them in public school or even private school, whatever public setting outside of your home is public, you need to make sure your children are protected, right? The flu is something your body can fight off. But a virus that you have, we don't know what the coronavirus is. I hope they don't associate it with the beer from Mexico, right? Right? It's unfair, really. There's something with that. Why is it called the coronavirus with a beer from Mexico? Something is up with that. You know, I don't think China has a word for corona. It's called COVID-19. That's the term they have come up with it. And it's running rampant through some parts of China right now. China can't even tell you what is really going on. They never really gave us true information in the first place. So you really think they're going to tell you? And that virus is directly impacted by lifestyles. Our lifestyle here in the western part of the world, especially here in America, is that we're very open. You know, we go out and so on. We're very open. We eat the same foods basically. And we have, by the health department, we're required to maintain certain standards of sanitation that are pervasive throughout the society. I can't just have a farm and kill a chicken and sell it. There are certain forms, there are certain required actions that are mandatory, that I must follow if I want to engage in the sale of food. This is why I respect them, because they are protective of us. They protect us. Do you see what I'm saying? Now you get why I'm so big on public safety, because I recognize that there is a danger in not adhering to the recommendations from public safety professionals and policymakers. Now you see why. Because we've got to protect the public. If we don't, we could have something like a coronavirus or some virus that just runs rampant through communities. I don't want to be a victim to such. So I go down there and I'm like, put the needle in. I'm good. Just give it to me. What are the side effects? How long do I have to be quarantined for it to work? You see where I'm coming from? And a lot of us will not take that advice We are listening to the guys. Check your information. See, everything I tell you, I can tell you right now. I got this story off NBC News. Whenever I come to you, I tell you the source. So it's a verifiable source. So you can go to the source, read the story for yourself, and see that I'm not just espousing theories that are wild, that they're based in fact, because I'm basing it on factual research. Something I'm going to talk about, something I go do the research on it to make sure that I can talk about it, and I'm aware of the source links. These people who are these anti-vaccination groups are coming up with ideas that have no place. Now, if they were saying, well, 100 years ago when people took the yellow fever shot, we're finding now that they're all zombies or so on, then you could say, okay, that might be true. But people have been taking the same shots for more than 60 years, and all of a sudden you're going to say it's the shots that cause autism. And then here's the thing. When that first started, people stopped taking the shots, the vaccinations, and the kids still had autism. So what is the cause of autism? It wasn't the vaccination in the first place. I think sometimes Jenny McCarthy first started this foolishness, and how are you going to take something that this girl who was a former Playboy model and so on, she probably was drunk at the time when she got pregnant. She probably drank most of the pregnancy. She probably was taking drugs all through the pregnancy. And you're going to believe her that a vaccination is what gave her son autism? No, I pray for the poor kid. No, she probably was exposed to stuff that because she didn't seem to pay attention based on her lifestyle. And sometimes when I look at today, I'm not going to kid you, I am alarmed today at younger women who are getting pregnant. When I see young women, they're pregnant and they're smoking with impunity. They're pregnant and smoking marijuana as if there's not going to be an effect on the child. No, that child is going to be born with some kind of complications, and they're going to blame the healthcare system and blame everybody else except their own complicity in doing it. I kid you not, young people, you healthcare professionals have to tell you when you're pregnant, don't drink, don't smoke, don't take weed, don't do drugs. Seriously? It's a whole different day. These are the same people who make up the anti-vaxxers movement. They're young people. They're under 50. They're under 45. Because if over 40, you realize that some of the stuff, it just does not make sense. You see where I'm coming from? So these young people, they're gullible. They have not studied it enough. They don't have the experience to remember when. So they base their opinions based on something that is not credible, and it's not refutable. I'm literally chomping at the bit because I'm thinking of my children, how vulnerable, now that I think about it, how vulnerable they could have been had I not had them vaccinated. I'm looking at them and they're healthy, normal individuals today, thank the Lord. Not just because they were vaccinated, but because I took the care. My oldest daughter came to me the other day, and my youngest daughter has this thing where she's getting older. So they're looking at their lives now and they're like, Mom, I just got to thank you. You took vitamins when you were pregnant with me. You took vitamins when you breastfed me. I just want to tell you, thanks, Mom. You didn't have to. You could have just said whatever and just had us, and then we would have been dependent for life and we wouldn't know but we're looking at ourselves, and people our age have certain things and we don't because you took the time out. People don't care anymore. It's like having a baby is something to post on social media and Instagram, a baby bump, something to brag about, but it's not something to care about. You see where I'm coming from? So they don't see having a baby as a long-term process. I like to tell folks that, you want to get pregnant? Think of the first 18 years. That alone will get you thinking, because it's an 18-year commitment. I once said that to a guy who was fooling around with some people, and I said, you realize every time you do that, you're looking at an 18-year commitment. And he actually looked at me and he said, wow, I never thought of it like that. I said, think about it. He said, that's how you see it. I said, it's an 18-year commitment. So that's the first 18. I find that people today are more casual about their interactions with others, and sometimes very hurtful. They don't think long term. If you're going to get pregnant, and think about the child is a human being who is going to grow up one day, what messages are you telling that child about himself and herself? Do you care enough to make sure that you have an environment in which at least medically he's safe? There's nothing wrong with treating your children and exposing them to natural remedies if it is required. But if you place the child under the care of a doctor, follow what the doctor says, unless the doctor is some spook who is going to, has issues. This is why I say know your healthcare professional. Get to know them, get to understand them, so they have a relationship with you. When you're in the doctor's office and the doctor is speaking, do you look them in the eye? Look them in the eye. Let them know you're human. You're not just another member of the public. Ask them questions. If you leave and you still have questions, most doctors welcome your questions. Call back and ask a question. They will answer. Right? And when you go into the public and you see healthcare professionals, be nice. They're on the front line. I went to the doctor yesterday, and it didn't hit me until I got there, and I said, oh my gosh, if somebody feels like they have the coronavirus, this is one of the first places they're going to come in contact with. And these folks are dealing with you, and they don't have masks on, they don't have gloves on, and they're dealing with members of the public. And I had to say thank you. I just literally turned around and said thank you for all you do, because it hit me at that time, right? They're touching you. They don't know what you have. My baby was sitting there. Well, she's not a baby anymore, but she's sitting there. And I'm like, you know what I mean? And most of us, what are our own standards of hygiene? Ourselves. Like, I keep wet wipes in my car. Do you? So I keep a pump of hand sanitizer. No, I'm not germophobic. I'm just like, when I go to pump gas, I use hand sanitizer before I put my hands on the wheel again to drive off. It's the little things. I tell my children to keep that in their cars too, right? I wash my hands frequently. My hands are perpetually dry because I wash my hands frequently. As soon as I touch something, I wash my hands. Before I touch anything else, I wash my hands. I'm finished here, right? Before I make myself a cup of tea, I go wash my hands. And it's just, it is what it is. We need to have our own standards of hygiene. Some people don't even shower every day. Some of us go to the bath. You've all seen that, right? You're in public, you are at the mall, or you're in some public space, and people go use the bathroom and walk out without washing their hands. God help us all. People still do that. So, Bath and Body Works sell those little hand sanitizers. I have one in every coat and in every purse. Bumps. I see people out in public sneeze. This is me with a hand sanitizer. Here you go. Right? These anti-vaxxer groups, it's ridiculous. We need to be vaccinated against some of these common diseases. They haven't come up with a shot yet for coronavirus, and they probably are not going to require most of the population. But they're going to ask if you've been exposed to it, you're going to have to be treated. And now we have to look at, like as Bill Gates said, we're not ready for a biological warfare like that. We are not ready because it's not in our thinking. We're thinking about going to space. Who gonna fight us from space? Russia is right over there next to Alaska. We don't have to go to space to fight Russia. We need to think about people like this, getting a virus from somewhere else and taking it to your city. And most of our cities are international. Right here in Metro Detroit. Detroit is a border city. We're right next door to Canada. The next town over is a whole other country. They're on the front lines just as we are. We have to be even more careful. Right? $9 billion in revenue come between over that bridge every year. That's a lot of money and a lot of folks. Right? So I'm encouraging all of us, we need to be mindful, take steps, right? If you're sneezing, do it in a tissue, dispose of it. Use Lysol, spray your environment out, and then leave the area so you don't inhale it, right? And make sure you take care of yourselves. Drink water, drink the stuff that you're supposed to do. And for the love of God, go get vaccinated if you haven't been. These things are running rampant. And we're lowering our immunity barriers by being constantly exposed to it. We're lowering the barriers. It's only a matter of time before we just start finding ourselves with stuff that wouldn't have bothered us a few years ago, right? This is Harriet Kemick. Thank you for joining me on my broadcast this morning. Facebook Anti-Vaxxers groups. You can read the story on NBCnews.com. That's where we got this story from. So shout out to the folks at NBC News, New York Times, the Washington Post. They do a tremendous job on investigative reporting on CNN and so on. They're on the front lines too. They're seeing it and they're reporting it to make us aware of what it is that is out there. And sometimes in our daily newscast, we don't even see these things. They kind of just slip past. Yeah. And there we are. So I'm going to post the link to the NBC News article so that you can read it. This 4-year-old boy in Colorado whose mom decided to ignore the advice of the doctor and the child died. Now she's facing child abuse charges and child neglect charges and possibly even manslaughter for the death of her own child because she chose to ignore that advice and took on the advice of a Facebook group. God help us all, right? Thank you so much, everybody. Still have a terrific Tuesday, right? See, I'm dressed in my colors and so on. Might have been snow on the ground, but hey, it's almost time. It's spring is coming. It's going to be Lent next week. Lent starts next Wednesday, right? And then after that, it's Easter, the Easter bunny. I went to the store and their Easter stuff is all over the place already. I'm like, springtime. And then we can just stop wearing less layers and look more human. Right? Be blessed, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me. Be blessed. Have a great Tuesday. Have a terrific Tuesday. And make sure you go to my website, harrietkemick.com, as well as view my podcast on all podcast platforms. So I'm on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Breaker, Overcast, you name it, we're on it. Right? And then go to my page on Anchor FM and support this podcast because this is a listener-supported station. Thank you so much, everybody. Be blessed. Hey, thanks for joining in. I appreciate you joining in from the United Kingdom. That's amazing. That's so amazing. Thank you so much. Be blessed.